Thanks for being here today. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions for our on-ground programs here in California. My name is Jake. I'm based here out of our San Diego campus, but I oversee admissions for all six of our California campuses, which include what we're talking about today, our Clinical Psychology PhD and PsyD programs. And also joining us today, we have Felice Miller, who is our Sacramento Senior Admissions Counselor. I'm really excited to be here with you today because we're discussing an extremely important topic, and this is the difference between starting your clinical psychology program in the summer versus the fall. It's really important to me and to us that our students are educated on the very big changes that have happened recently and to understand that impact of choosing your start date to be summer or fall. So, what does that mean? When should you start? What does that mean for you specifically? And why did we even come up with the summer option for you guys? So, these are all questions we'd like to address today. So, this is our agenda today. We basically just went over one, which is the purpose of today's webinar, the big changes and our summer versus fall start dates. We'll move over into an introduction from our CEO and president, Andy Vaughn, who has a unique perspective on all of this. Then to our finance officer to discuss the federal changes and the nitty gritty details of all of that. Open up for Q&A, and then discuss the next steps for you. So I'd like to hand it over to our president and CEO, Andy Vaughn.
All right, Jake, thank you so much. We're going to have two Q&A sessions today, everyone. The first one will be here in a few minutes, specifically about the federal changes that I helped write actually in DC. I'll cover that in a second. So think about any questions you might have about federal policy change, whether it's the legislation piece, which was called the One Big Beautiful Bill signed last July, that moved through Congress and signed by the president, or moving the legislation into regulation, which I'll discuss here briefly. And happy to answer any questions about the federal process. I had the unique experience of serving as a federal negotiator for the U.S. Department of Education. In negotiator rulemaking sessions, the department and any department at the executive branch level is required to select federal negotiators that represent the sector that would be impacted by any change, whether that's legislation or regulation. In this case, it's both. And there were three of us that were selected to represent all 5,000 universities and colleges in the United States. So myself and Jenna and Tim from different universities served as the three federal negotiators for the higher education sector. It's quite the honor. Was really honored to be nominated and then finally selected by the Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Education, Nicholas Kemp, in that responsibility. We ended up as a team hearing arguments on both sides of the aisle about changes to federal negotiations and rulemaking, which then result in regulation. So here's the process. It's unusual that Congress acts to change regulation. A regulation is typically written at the executive branch level by each department. So Department of Energy, Department of Labor, Department of Education, in our case. They're able to, under the president of the party that's in charge at the time, to write rules, policies, regulations as they see fit. It's really unusual that Congress comes in ahead of them to dictate bumpers and parameters and borders on what those regulations should be. It's almost unheard of. Last year was a very unique situation. So Congress on the House side started writing the One Big Beautiful Bill, and then the Senate had their own version. Alliant was very early in that process just because of our interest over the years of federal policy. We actually helped rewrite the gainful employment regulation under the Biden administration back in 2023 and 2022. And our university is really well connected in DC and just knows a lot of the legislative and regulatory staff in really all departments across DC. So we've been very active over the years in DC on federal policy. Why is that? Because we're the most regulated sector in the world. Nobody has more regulators, accreditors, or hands in our business than U.S. higher education. And for that reason, we've always chosen to be very early in the process as ideas are formulated into regulation and legislation. So we actually flew out to DC several times early last year to talk to federal policy advisors and federal policy writers. Let's face it, Congress, the elected members themselves don't write bills, they vote on them. And that's not their job to write bills. They have a team of researchers and writers that do that. And we met the three people that wrote One Big Beautiful Bill, the higher education part of it. and got to know them very well. Pretty much the same team that was also writing legislation back in 2023. So very familiar group that we've worked with before. And it became very clear to us that while most of the country was focused on other stories, that this would be the seminal and most important issue of higher education change, and that is changes to Title IV loan limits. We identified that over a year ago, late January of 25, as a potential change long before the media picked it up, because we have a lot of contacts in DC that were saying, hey, I'm hearing chatter in the education committees about what's going to happen later this year. And sure enough, it did. So we were fortunate enough to get a nomination and a vote to get on the team. And again, there was three of us. And in that room was the congressional staff on one side and the Department of Education on another. And our job was to write 17 new regulations centered around Title IV, some of which you probably heard in the media on the nursing story. I'll have more on that in a second. But really, it came down to 16 to 17 different regulations, the most important of which were really dictated by Congress. Typically, in negotiator rulemaking, you have authority to have a blank slate. That wasn't the case this time around, and that's what makes it unusual. Congress this time supersedes and preempts the Department of Education from an open slate. This time around, there were definitive rules and bumpers on what we could and couldn't write as regulations. So Congress said they are going to get rid of the Grad PLUS loan for all new students after July 1st of 26. That was non-negotiable. We were not there to negotiate keeping Grad PLUS. Congress then said for Stafford direct loans, which are basically what people refer to as student loans, that those would have new caps for graduate funding, and any program designated as professional would get the $200,000 aggregate cap for graduate programs. All other graduate programs would have a $100,000 cap. Undergraduate loans were largely untouched. The undergrad programs, some changes on Parent Plus loans, but really not a whole lot of change at the undergrad level. Most of the change was really focused at graduate level programs, including doctoral and masters. So that was our work. There were some things we could not negotiate, and we got to work mainly on what programs would be designated as professional and which would remain at masters. There were a lot of programs, obviously, that wanted to get on the professional designation list, and we lobbied for dozens of them to get that. In the end, clinical psychology was added to the professional designation list, so we're pleased about that. It's not over yet. There could be another program or two that might get in. There's public comment going on right now for the next 4 weeks as the final stage of NEG-REG, known as negotiator rulemaking, comes to a close on March 2nd. And so I've talked to certainly a lot of university presidents that have programs like physician assistant, nurse practitioner, doctor of nurse practitioner programs, nurse anesthesiologist, that are making their arguments to be included on that list. But for now, clinical psychology was the only addition to the original 10 programs on the list. Clinical psych is in company with programs like medical doctor, MD, DDS dental, osteopathy, known as DO, and a few others like chiropractic and vet, things like that. What that means is effective July 1st for all new students, the new cap is 200,000. That's actually a little bit higher than it is now for clinical psychology. On the downside, though, is the elimination of Grad PLUS. So how do these two loans work? The federal direct Stafford loan for clinical psychology will have a new cap of 200,000 aggregate for all graduate programs. If you're coming in to a clinical psychology doctoral program and you have debt from another graduate program, whether that's master's or doctorate that you've done somewhere else and got Title IV for that, student loan funding from the federal government, that would count against that 200,000. So let's say you're coming in with a master's degree and you have 40,000 in debt from that master's. That takes that 200 and brings it down to 160. Your undergraduate debt will not impact that number. So anything that you've done in student loan debt at the federal level, that's government loans, not private, will not impact a clinical psychology debt for the new federal staffer. It doesn't count against that. It's only graduate level debt, but anything you've done at the graduate level will certainly dent that 200,000. For all other programs at the graduate level, except for the 11 designated as professional, that new cap is 100,000. That's effective for new students as of July 1st. You have a couple of choices here. If you are able to start class in our summer start versus in the August or September start dates, you'll become what's known as the legacy program. And the legacy program is something we negotiated in NEGREG last year with the Department of Education, that students that enroll and start classes and get funded through federal programs prior to June 30th at midnight, meaning that loan has to be dispersed. If you're going to start June 1st or so, or late May, whatever that start date is for Clinical Psych at Alliant, and you wait a little bit too long to get that loan dispersed in July or August, you will not fall in the legacy program. It would be something you have to really pay attention to on applications and Title IV processes through the Alliant Financial Aid team to make sure those loans are dispersed before June 30th at midnight. Students that are in the legacy program get to keep Grad PLUS for about 3 years. Grad PLUS would be available for 3 years until June 30th of 2029, at which time it'll be extinguished 100% for all users. But new students that enroll and start a program after July 1st will not have access to any Grad PLUS. So what's the difference for clinical psych? Typically, the loan on the federal Stafford Direct side covers all your tuition, books, and fees in most situations. Unless you come in with a lot of graduate debt, then it may not. We've found about 40% of Alliant clinical psychology doctoral students use Grad PLUS to help with living expenses, because as you know, if you've done some research in clinical psychology programs, it's really tough to work full time, if at all, during many of the clinical rotations, extern site requirements. And, I'm married to a marriage family therapist, and even the marriage family therapy program at Alliant, as I've experienced with my spouse, has a lot of challenges when you're trying to work and do your hours of supervision with certain kinds of clients and patients. It's really tough. And so we found about 40% of our clinical psychology students have used Grad PLUS to help with rent, groceries, living expenses, at least for a few years while they're doing some externship activities, things like that. So what does that mean for you? If you are able to start in the summer versus the fall start, you would be a part of the legacy program and have access to Grad PLUS through June 30th of 2029, and have access to the old Stafford Direct, which isn't as important for clinical psych, because quite frankly, Stafford Direct is going up in its cap for clinical psychology, not down. However, with the elimination of Grad PLUS, it gives you a little bit of leeway and some extra added insurance for access to federal loans if you need them down the road. Here's another important distinction, and it's a nuanced detail that's not been published yet because the final reg is not out yet, but I can tell you because I was on the team. I believe that the final rule should include the following language, and let me just put a disclaimer in here. We negotiated this, but the final language will not be published until June 1st of this year. So we'll have to just double check that with financial aid when you enroll. But access to Grad PLUS, if you're in the legacy program, meaning you've started in June versus August, can be something you put on hold for a bit. As long as you are a customer of any federal loan at the graduate level, you'll have access to Grad PLUS. What am I trying to say here? You do not have to have a Grad PLUS loan prior to July 1st to later on use a Grad PLUS loan if you're in the legacy program. If you do a federal Stafford Direct for your first term and you're packaged before June 30th of 2026, you will then be eligible to use Grad PLUS if you need it down the line. Because I think there is a lot of people thinking, oh, I just have to take out some loan money for Grad PLUS to be in the legacy program. We don't believe that's going to be true in the final rule. We'll double check that when it's published on June 1st of this year, but that would be something else to consider. The bottom line is this: students that start classes before June 30th of 26 versus after July 1st of 26 will have access to more favorable loan terms. If you just cannot start in the June start and you are really looking towards August or September, that's fine too. You'll still have access to the new Stafford Direct loan, which has that cap of 200K, plenty of room in there, unless you've got a lot of graduate debt coming in. The Grad PLUS is really the situation for clinical psych students you want to pay attention to. For those that start after July 1st and run out of cap room under the Stafford Direct because of prior graduate debt, we have relationships that have been built with at least 3 private lenders that will come in and take the place of Grad PLUS for new students after July 1st. Now, those interest rates are a little higher for private loans than they are federal loans. So you have to keep that in mind too. And they're based on credit scores. for private loans. But again, every situation is different. And what this team is really going to encourage you to do today is talk to Alliant Financial Aid about all your options, when you start, what the benefit is for you, because everyone's situation is a little different. It'll be really important that you take all the information we give you today and then have an individual assessment for your needs based on your prior school, how much debt you've taken at the graduate level, if any at all, and then kind of take it from there and we'll figure out the right path. We'll help you with that. All right. So that's a lot, I know. Just to give you an idea of how complex this was, we spent 90 days working with the Department of Education team as negotiators, writing these final regulations, which include loan repayment terms, public loan service forgiveness, things of that sort. And all that will be published in the Federal Register here this summer as the final rules come out. If you want to read more about that, you can certainly do some research online. It's pretty easy to find as well. I assume there's going to be some questions about the complexity of this topic, and we can start taking those on the Q&A. The first question is, you mentioned other schools were lobbying for these changes. What are the programs that are offering this legacy plan? Any Title IV institution at the graduate level will have access to the old loan limits as long as they're a Title IV granting school. So every school is eligible for legacy. It's not done by school. It's rather, are you a Title IV institution? Alliant is, and most schools are. But if the school's Title IV, they'll have access to the legacy plan. Another one is, what led to these changes? Well, the angst of Congress under this administration is the cost of education. When I was in the room with the Department of Education, they're, they're not happy, especially at the master's degree level, how much tuition has gone up. I will tell you that Alliant's Clinical Psychology doctoral program is among the lowest priced program in the state of California that's APA accredited, which we are. There are a lot of APA, PsyD, and PhD programs that are well north of 200,000. We're in the bottom 25% on pricing for that program because we don't believe that a student should have to pay the top price for the program. And you'll find our programs are of high quality, APA accredited. We have a 55-year history in clinical psychology, and we're the largest in California. About 40% of licensed clinical psychologists come from the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant University. And nationally, about 10% of all licensed psychologists come from Alliant. So we certainly have been doing this a long time. We are not priced out of the market like some schools are. Under the legacy program, what is the cap amount? Well, Grad PLUS is unlimited. There is no cap on Grad PLUS. It's to the full cost of living expenses and tuition. So Grad PLUS doesn't really have a cap. I mean, it kind of does, but it's really up to the student to work with financial aid for the total cost of the program. Again, Grad PLUS is the loan that's typically used for things outside of tuition fees and books, and Stafford Direct is used for tuition fees and books and associated costs at the university. The legacy program for this program would be more in line with saving Grad PLUS for 3 years while you're doing your first 3 years of school. Next question is, do you happen to know what may happen to repayment to this shift from Grad PLUS being considered a professional degree? The professional degree status will not change repayment. Those are two separate topics. The loan repayment plans are actually a separate regulation that were written. Of the 17 regs that we wrote with the department last October, November, December, only 2 of them were about loan limits and Title IV. The rest were really about loan repayment rates, things of that sort. The impacts on repayment are going to be a separate issue. Those will be published in about a month. And matter of fact, you could probably find them online now. Just do a search on Google or whatever your search engine is and put in Federal Register, Department of Education, Title IV regulation proposal. It is still under proposal, but you'll find on the Federal Register the exact document that lists what is likely to be the final regulations on both loan repayment and Title IV changes. You'll clearly see in there that clinical psychology has indeed been added to the professional designation list. You'll also see in there what is likely to become the final policy on loan repayment. It's not a huge, drastic change, but there are some changes. The biggest question we get is about loan forgiveness for public service. And you'll see it clearly listed in there what will be eligible. And typically, it's been about 10 years working in a nonprofit. There are some nuanced changes, but all that can be found in the Federal Register under the Department of Education if you want to really take a look at that, if public loans forgiveness is a topic of interest to you. Next question, just to be clear, without Grad PLUS loans, what government public loans are available to us? You'll still have access to the Stafford Direct Loan, and that new cap is going from about 157,000 up to 200,000. So the cap is actually increasing for clinical psychology by tens of thousands to 200,000. So if you do not start before July 1st, and you're going to be a fall start or beyond this fall start, you will not have access to Grad PLUS anymore, but you will have Stafford Direct, a government student loan at all the interest rates and amortization time schedules that you're used to. That'll still be available for you with a new higher cap for clinical psych. If you're here in this webinar and you're going to do a different program, what I just said would not apply to you, but I think everyone on here today is for clinical psychology. Clinical psychology is only one of 11 programs that made the professional designation list. If you're in a master's degree, that cap is actually going down, not up. But clinical psych is experiencing a little bit of a benefit and a higher loan limit for Stafford Direct. Next question, do private student loans have an impact on credit score? They do. Quite frankly, so do federal student loans if you don't repay them. They may not ding your credit when you're inquiring, but a private loan would be much like taking out a credit card or an auto loan or a mortgage, that they would be a hard inquiry on your credit, and then a repayment rate of whatever that company has, probably a little bit higher interest rate than the federal student loans. So yes, they do track those on credit scores. Next question, would people who start in the summer graduate earlier than those who start in fall? Possibly. I think that question is better asked to the team here that will be with you on this webinar. And if they don't have the answer, they can find it from our program directors in the clinical psychology departments who could better answer that. It is possible. We'll find that answer for you. If we can't get it today, we'll follow up with you through email. Second part of that same question, are we paying more in total for those extra 2 to 3 months? No, the cost is really the same. You're paying by the unit, not the time. And so starting in the summer would not add units to your program. So if you start in the June start versus August or September, the total amount you're paying for the program is going to be the same. Next question, if I'm not concerned about debt yet, I should just apply for the Grad PLUS on admission to make sure I haven't that is probably the safest way to go. So I think this question is for someone that enrolls before July 1st of this year and they're in the legacy program, should you just apply for Grad PLUS? It's probably the safest thing to do. I would think, yes. What the department has informed us though in the final draft regulation, again, these are not final until June, but what you read on the Federal Register, as I referenced earlier, is probably pretty close to final, is that if you have a Stafford Direct loan before June 30th, you'll still have access to Legacy on Grad PLUS too. It is probably safer if you go ahead and do both at the same time in the month of June at the latest of this year. Not a question, just want to say thank you for advocating for us. Oh, you're welcome. You got it. By the way, I went to the Alliant Board of Trustees to ask permission to do the role as negotiator because I knew it would take me away from my job at least half time for a couple of months, but it was truly an amazing experience. You know, we had a chance to affect some change here, everybody, but just know that, you know, I did take some flack after being on that committee, people, especially on the nursing side. Why did you add nursing to the program? Quite frankly, we couldn't. Understand that the way NEGREG worked this time is Congress spoke first, and that is not typical. That is, I've been in higher ed 32 years. I've never seen Congress act first and then NEGREG happens second. Congress usually does not intervene in negotiated rulemaking, and this time around, Congress actually wrote the bill that dictated what NEGREG would be. There were certain things we just could not negotiate. So we did our best. We tried to soften the edges where we could, especially in loan repayment and things of that sort. We had a couple of attorneys in the room on our team as well on the negotiator side that really helped soften some language on loan repayment terms. You'll see that in the Federal Register if you care to read it. it was for the greater good. This was not an Alliance specific role that I wanted to do, but just something that I thought was really important. So thanks for that. Next question. My UCSD undergrad program's end date overlaps with the summer start date for Alliant. Am I still able to enroll summer start date for Alliant? That is the question of the hour. Please pose that to our staff. And I don't know if this staff has an answer on that yet. But if they don't, what we're going to have to do to check that is work it out with our financial aid director, Deb Spindler, and the program director. I assume you're going to San Diego campus since you're at UCSD. And we'll talk to our two program directors in the clinical psych departments there at San Diego to find that out. But let's get that question for you answered in the next week. I'm confident we'll know that answer here in a matter of days. We can't get it to you today. Next question. When I got an overview of your time to make the complex deal work in our favor, you're working okay, move forward the line. Well, thanks, hey, Kyla. Thank you. Thanks for that. You were probably reading along in the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed. I developed a positive relationship with one of the journalists at Inside Higher Ed. Her name's Jessica. She was in the room with us for all the weeks we were in DC and wrote a lot of stories about our journey to affect change. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Further question from Kyla is, my start date is the new summer session, but I didn't realize I could engage with Alliant Financial Aid before. Yeah, you can. Jake, Felice, that's right. The prospective students can still contact financial aid and kind of, yeah, that's what I
Of
thought.
course,
You
yeah.
sure can. They'll give you that information today. My interview is early next week. Is it possible to move forward with financially before I'm fully accepted? I believe so, but have Jake and Felice and others answer that question for you here today. So if you don't plan to exceed 200,000 in loans, it wouldn't be necessary to start early in order to start losing. Probably not. No. It's from Grace. Grace, I would then you don't have to answer this on the chat. It really depends if you have incoming graduate level debt. So keep this in mind. What you're going to have to weigh on that is, are you working part-time? Not at all. What do those living expenses look like for you for the next 4 years if you're doing PsyD, and probably 5 if you're doing PhD? And then kind of calculate backwards from there. Grad Plus for our clinical psychology students, I can't speak for every school, but I do stay in constant contact with all the clinical psychology presidents across the country. I just was with dozens of them last week in Atlanta for a conference. What we found as a group of presidents that oversee clinical psychology colleges and universities is that Grad Plus really has not been used for tuition and fees because Stafford Direct really covers all of that, unless you come in with a ton of graduate debt. Then all bets are off. But most of our students don't. The Grad Plus has really been used for the living expense part or extra expenses that are related to your academic program, and the fact you can't work full time during the program. That's where it comes in. I don't understand how it works if I have two cohorts at the same time, one starting in June and another in August. Will professors be double booked? No, they will not be double booked. We'll have some program directors actually teaching those summer courses, adjunct faculty teaching others. And then when you move to the fall semester, which starts in late August, it just becomes pretty much on the track you were in. So there's no double booking and twice as busy, none of that. I don't know how many units are going to be in the summer sessions, either 6 or 9. But the program will move it, at the same clip, but it won't be double booked. Are there any scholarships available for clinical psych students? Yes, there are. Alliant Financial Aid will have some resources on that, how you look for those. In addition, we have our 501c3 Alliant Foundation that offers scholarships for clinical psychology students specifically. If you go to your favorite search engine and put in Alliant University Foundation or Alliant Educational Foundation, you'll find their URL, which is different than alliant.edu. It's a separate legal entity. It's our foundation. It's where the scholarships are introduced for Alliant students that are internal in nature. But if you go to the Alliant Educational Foundation, you'll see some additional information there about scholarships. Does Alliant do any tuition reimbursement programs such as TA, research positions? Yeah, we also have federal work study. We have a budget next year of about, I think it's 400,000 to $500,000 for federal work study, which includes TA positions and research positions. So you want to talk to your program director within clinical psychology about federal work study money that's allocated for those types of reimbursement. Next question, would the eligibility for Grad Plus be affected if we take a break from school for 1 or 2 months? It's possible. You're talking about the legacy program now. However, as a negotiator, we were able to successfully insert language which should, and I stress should, make it to the final reg. It's in the draft that's on the Federal Register right now. If you take an approved leave of absence, so here's the two examples I gave the department we were in the room. One was, hey, what if a student has a critical illness and they need to take care of themselves for a semester or two? I don't think they should be punished. The department agreed. I also gave another scenario that's happened in our time at Alliant. Someone's spouse tragically dies unexpectedly, and we wouldn't want to expect them to continue that semester. Hey, you know what? Let's be empathetic and let's be human here and allow them to take a leave of absence. Come on. That shouldn't kick them out of legacy. And the department agreed. I think what'll make it in the final rule that'll be published June 1st is that an approved leave of absence will not automatically kick you out of legacy status. However, I want to preface this with the following, and that is make sure that we pay attention to the final rule. Sometimes the final rule is different than the draft rule, but I think that's going to stay in. We were big on leave of absences to not kick people out of legacy program. Another one is I understand some students that have previous graduate loans are in a holding pattern, not being denied, not knowing to interview. When will they know? Let's ask that question to Jake and Felice and company here. Felice, if you're in the room, can you flag that question for your team?
Yes, sir.
So Grace asks, can Stafford be used for living expenses too? I believe so. Yeah, I think as long as it's a part of the total cost of attendance, which would include for clinical psychology most likely living expenses. Let's be very detailed though, Grace, and ask that question to financial aid or maybe to this team. But I believe that is correct. If you're not coming in with any or very little graduate debt and you're going to go to that $200,000 cap if you're starting in the August session, yeah, you should be okay on that, is my guess. But let's double check that. Grace. Another question, how many classes will be required for the summer start? This team can answer that. So Felice and Jake, will you answer that in a moment? Next is, I had my interview on campus. We were informed summer courses will be offered online. Is that correct? Jake and Felice can answer that. So Grace then asked, I'm trying to understand the main difference between Stafford Direct and Grad PLUS. Sure. So I'll just be very brief here. So Stafford Direct is typically when someone says, I have a student loan, I got a student loan. That's typically Stafford Direct. That is about 90% of what student loan volume is from the federal programs. If someone says, I'm paying a student loan, 9 out of 10 times they're talking about a Stafford Direct loan. Stafford Direct right now for clinical psychology has a cap of about 157, but any graduate debt coming in goes against that again. If you're not in the legacy program, the new cap for Stafford Direct will go to 200,000, as long as that's in the final reg that's published June 1st. Again, there's a small chance it won't, but come on, we've worked hard on this. I mean, in 32 years, I've never seen draft regulation not include the same language that goes into final, at least in an additive way. Grad PLUS typically has been used by most graduate students, not for tuition and fees so much, but for added expenses on attending graduate school, especially in programs that are professional in nature. Medical doctors, DDS, osteopathy, chiropractic, veterinarian, clinical psychology, to name 5 of 10 doctoral programs on the professional designation list, are programs where it's difficult to work full time because of the clinical hours required for a state license. We've run medical doctor programs through Alliant as well. So an MD, they can't work at all, not even part-time. Clinical psychology, maybe part-time, but there's a couple of years in there where it's really tough to even do that. Not saying it's impossible, but so Grace, just so you understand, so Stafford Direct has really been look at it as the foundation of the house. Your Stafford Direct, the house is built on that. If you're taking Title IV student loans, Grad PLUS is the next floor up if you need it. Some people don't need a 2-story house, but hey, I'd like to have one, and I'm going to go up there and get some Grad PLUS to help with the other expenses of going to graduate school. That's what Grad PLUS is. It's the second story of the house, but not everybody has a 2-story house. They don't need one. Hopefully that helps. What will happen if we did not start classes or choose to enroll into the clinical psychology program until this fall or next fall? I don't have any outstanding federal graduate loans. Okay, well then you're in pretty good shape. This is from Rosalind. So if you choose to start in the fall of 26 after the July 1st deadline to be in the legacy program for Title IV, or you choose fall of 27, your cap for clinical psych will most likely be 200,000. You're in pretty decent shape, unless you're going to need a lot more for living expenses. Quite frankly, a lot of students have situations where they've got a spouse that is gainfully employed, or they've got family they can move in with, or they've saved up, while they can't work full time, and they don't have the same need. And about 60, the majority of our students do not take Grad PLUS. So that's great news. But not everyone can do that. The Grad PLUS has been available for those students. So if you're going to wait until the fall or next fall of 27, that's perfectly fine. Just know that Grad PLUS wouldn't be available. But if you don't need it, it really wouldn't matter to you. All right, so Carrie asked, to be clear, for those in the legacy program, will the Stafford lifetime limit be frozen at 157? I believe so, Carrie, but that is a nuanced question that we did not address in negotiator rulemaking. But it really doesn't matter, because Grad Plus would still be available for you, and Grad Plus it's a couple points higher in interest rate, but not a whole lot. I think it's 1.5 or 2 points. I don't quote me on that. But the Grad Plus amortization terms are favorable, just as Stafford Direct. They're pretty equal in that matter. So if you were the legacy program and you've got the lower limit on Stafford, but you have access to Grad Plus, you're still in pretty good shape, because Grad Plus is very flexible in how much the limit is. I believe, everyone, after living through this in DC, the slightly better deal for not all, but for most students, is going to be to start before the fall, to be in the legacy program. But every situation is different. You'll have to kind of weigh these different scenarios for what's best for you. And we're here to support you in what's best for you. Whatever that route is, we'll give you the guidance on what's best for your individual situation. But yeah, it probably will be at the lower limit for Stafford Direct, but it doesn't matter as much, because that Grad Plus gave you some leeway on the other side. Next question: do I need to apply for the Grad Plus loan before July 1st, even if I start school in June? Actually, you need to apply in June for that. Remember, here's what the rule is going to say to have legacy status, everybody. I cannot stress this enough. If you're going to be in the legacy program and you want access to Grad Plus for clinical psychology, that loan needs to be really in motion and almost dispersed by late June. If you start in the June start date, and Jake and Felice, the start date is June, what again? June 1st. Okay. So if you do the June 1st start, you're already going to be talking to financial aid and getting these applications for federal Title IV funding going through a motion. And then boom, we'll get those. Our team knows that the federal rule for legacy status is June 30th, that night deadline. They're going to be working overtime to make sure these loans are dispersed in time for you to be part of legacy. So you'll need to actually apply for financial aid if you're going to be in the legacy program right away in June. Next question: outside of Grad Plus, are there any benefits to starting in the summer? That's the main one, really. Look, if a fall start's better for you, great. We'll support you in that too. Outside of Grad Plus, any benefits of starting in the summer? You might finish a little bit earlier. I can't think of any offhand besides those two aspects. Elise, you have one?
I would say that depending on your program and how it's structured, sometimes they're shifting units around. So it might feel a little bit different towards the end of the year, because you might be doing some coursework that might take place later, and you're doing it sooner. So then that semester might look and feel a little different for you near the end. And that will vary by campus, of course.
Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we have, and I probably preempted a lot of the comments that are on the slides here from Jake, Felice, and others, and I'm sorry for that if I did that. But again, I think that's okay. This topic is not for the faint of heart. It's very complex. Listen, my head was spinning, and I was deep in it at the federal level. We were going line by line through every regulation, so you can imagine the pain we endured doing that for 90 days. At the Department of Education. But it was a great experience overall. I'm really happy that we were able to have Alliant a seat at the table. So I hope that was helpful for all of you. We look forward to seeing you at Alliant, hopefully, and really appreciate the invite to come to the webinar today. And Jake and Felice and others, I'm sorry if I preempted through the Q&A session most of your content.
Better coming from you. Absolutely. No problem.
I think you should cover the content again, because it is a very, very tough topic. Again, there are so many nuances within it. I think it's okay to say one more time. So thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andy. Well, as you can see, everybody, we are very thankful for Andy's work and all of this. And he's made a big impact in getting that professional designation to make it so we can get the $200,000 for the cap was outstanding. And he had a very big hand in that. Once again, as Andy said, it's possible that some of the content we're going to go over, and a lot of the questions that you guys have, by the way, I want to let you know it's going to be answered in these slides, but some may not. So towards the end, if you guys want to ask, we just want to get through this content. And I'm going to hand it over to Khan here. He's our student finance officer who will go over some more of the nitty-gritty details of the finances.
Thank you, Jake. Hi, hello there again. Good afternoon. My name is Khan from Alliant Student Finance. Today we'll be talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Again, about the changes of eligibility, availability, and the limit in federal student loans. With pretty much we'll just review what Andy kind of went over briefly too. Right now, currently for current, active, and new Alliant students whose loans have dispersed before June 30th, 2026, they be classified as legacy Title IV students, which means you'll be able to keep access to your Graduate Plus and be able to keep the existing cap in your direct subsidized loans through June 2029. So again, that's the date that we'll have to make sure that you're protected under the legacy provision until June 2029. Or if you exceed your expected program completion date, again, that's another way for you to lose it. We'll actually go over to the next slide right now, which you can see the factors that make you lose your provision. So let's say you start for the summer session and you're again protected under the legacy provision. These are the ways for you to lose your provision. These factors will extend your enrollment, which will in turn pass the July 2029 date. Again, if you're registered into any zero-unit courses, any approved academic absences, part-time enrollment to obtain internship or practicum, or again exceed your enrollment agreement is a way for you to lose your provision. This was what Andy kind of mentioned earlier about the changes and the professional designation. Again, for yourself, you'll be under the professional program student, which in turn will be $50 annually and $200 lifetime. If you choose to start after for the fall start or lose your provision. Following scenarios are considered both tuition fees, costs, and living. So it's important to consider the following. Total cost is subject to change, varies to campus location. Graduate Plus coverage is subject to eligibility. Unsubsidized loans would be reduced if you have previous borrowed loans. So the slide here is scenario one. This is if you choose to, again, the summer session, your entire tuition fees for your program. Percentage could be covered is about 81% through unsubsidized loans. And then if you choose to start for the fall, it could be covered around 72%. For the minimum percentage of program cost coverage through Graduate Plus, if you start in the summer, the remaining amount could be covered through Graduate Plus about 90%. And with the funding gaps, it would be 0% coverage. So most likely for the fall start, if you're just looking at like if you need that additional for cost of living, things like that, that'd be most likely through private loans and other sources. Scenario two, PhD clinical psychology programs. For example, at Fresno, PhD clinical psychology, about 63% could be coverage through unsubsidized loans, and about 37% be coverage through Graduate Plus loans if you choose to start for the summer session. And if you plan to start for the fall session, 56% could be covered through your unsubsidized loans, and then the remaining amount, about 44%, will be covered through your outside private loans, because graduate loans will not be available for you to use. Please feel free to schedule an appointment for our student finance officers. We could definitely go more in depth in details pertaining to your current financial aid. If you've taken out any loans, things like that, we could definitely walk through your steps and see what you're eligible for throughout your lifetime here. The best way, again, is to schedule another appointment with us or give us a call at this number here.
Awesome. Thanks, Con. We could certainly get in contact with you all by setting up an appointment with the finance officer. But one of the best ways for us to give you an individualized and a personal financial understanding of your situation is after you've completed your FAFSA and once we are able to have classes added to your schedule. Once you have a full-time schedule and your FAFSA, we'll be able to then give you a bit more of a personalized understanding for you. Right now, if you don't have either of those two done, we can just give you general information, kind of like the stuff we're going over today. So I just want to make that clear that if you're going into that appointment, that those are the two things that we'd want to have before being able to give you maybe some more of those detailed and personal financial questions answered. These next two slides are just going to be talking about summer and fall. A lot of this content was already discussed, but basically our summer overview is yes, June 1st, 2026 start date. You could begin your program sooner. And I know that we have discussed if the program length would be changed or we finish earlier. That's really going to depend on how the program directors choose to rearrange the coursework. However, you would obviously maintain your legacy status by starting in the summer, lighten potential future course load, and then a potential online option. I did see someone ask this question in the Q&A, so I wanted to touch on this as well. The online option is going to vary from location. I've actually been personally communicating with each program director at each campus for all of our clinical psychology programs. Many of them have some type of master plan. Not all of them do. And those master plans, for the most part, have considered an online option. So that online option is really going to depend on your location and your program. So what I'd recommend is you connect with your admissions counselor for your location. They're going to be the most up to date on what master plan is being created for your program and location. So it's important that you use your best resource, which is your admissions counselor. Another thing to note, if you are an international student, that online option, if there is one, is not going to be an option for those that are trying to uphold a visa for their international education. So you do need to be in person if you are an international student. I want to make that distinction very clear. So another question that did come up was, Andy, I'm glad he kind of touched on it. He said there is going to be some kind of answer if your degree finishes slightly after the start date of June 1st. So if your education ends the end of May and you want to start for June 1st, obviously there's not going to be a transcript and a conferral date on your transcript to send over to us. That's a question we've been getting. However, it is really common for registrar's offices to send out letters to our registrar's office letting us know that you did complete all of your classes. So it's like a letter of completion from the registrar's office in lieu of transcripts. So those would be accepted as long as your education actually is completed before June 1st. But it sounds like there is some talk of, if you do finish slightly after June, there may be something we can do. I have not heard anything about that, but there seems to be something in the works. If that's your situation, once again, keep in contact with your counselor, and then we're going to give you the most up-to-date information. This is the fall overview. It really is just business as usual. We start August 21st, 2026. You begin this traditional fall semester. You will kind of collide with that incoming semester cohort. So you guys would kind of merge into one cohort. Once again, those summer folks are just pulling back some courses and then picking up with the August start with the other folks that are starting for the fall. You would not be legacy status. That won't be an option for you. And it will be in-person instruction only, no online. Once again, that's business as usual. We never have offered online for APA clinical programs. All right, what if you already applied? If you did already apply, it's not too late. Email me directly, email Felice, email any one of us, your counselor. We will help you out. We are really encouraging folks to apply for summer. And I swear every single day I am helping students get their applications moved over summer. Once again, it's really, really nice to have Grad PLUS as an option. So that's what we've been encouraging. And that's what Andy encourages as well. So it is not too late. I know that there were some questions that were floating around. I think we answered a good handful of them.
Actually, I do see one. Does the school offer graduate assistantships, and how do we apply for those if it is offered?
Yeah, Andy actually was discussing that we do have federal work study. I think he was saying it was like 400 to $500,000 in federal work study and for TA. So, Colin, that is an option, correct?
That's correct, yes. You can always just email that question to our offices too. We could happy to answer those questions for you.
And we have another question here. Is there an application or decision deadline for the summer start date? We have rolling admissions. How far that rolling admissions goes sometimes depends on your location. I've seen it go farther at some locations than others, but yes, you still have time. We covered a lot, and most of it was answered by Andy, which I gotta say, getting the answers from Andy is better than getting an answer from anyone else. He is the best. We are very happy that he has been here advocating for us. Next steps here, basically, set up your appointment with finance officer if you'd like to do so. Continue to communicate with your admissions counselor. If you are interested in switching start dates, just get in contact with your counselor so you can set up an appointment with your counselor if you'd like to do so, or if you don't have a counselor, feel free to set up one and then they can help you out with the application as well. I did see another question come through. Are we allowed to accept our summer acceptance? Can we delay the enrollment to next summer? Would we still be able to get into Legacy Grad Plus program? So if you accept your summer, if you confirm and you complete your EA and you delay it, that's what we call deferring your enrollment. If you defer to next summer, and that is if we do offer a next summer, we don't even know if we're going to be offering another summer again. It's possible that we won't. We're doing this specifically to get ahead of this Grad Plus situation. You would not be eligible for the Grad PLUS. It has to be before July 1st, and the loans have to be dispersed before then. Well, I just want to thank everyone for coming. I really hope that we were able to answer your questions. I'm very excited to have had this conversation and this webinar with you all because it is such an important topic, and very happy to see that Andy was able to join. If there's any other outstanding questions, just go ahead and set up an appointment with the counselor, and good luck, everybody. We hope to see you.